I would like to hand the microphone over to Baljeet. I'll let him make introductions to himself and some of his cohorts that he has as panelists helping as well. But we've been working on this for a long time to put this together. Baljeet's been kind enough to do a couple of presentations for the chapter that were very informative, but it also kind of made us aware that we needed more time and that there was something deeper that we could go down and learn about. And that's what was really the prequel to all of these workshops coming together. And this is the first one. Tim, is there anything you want to say?
Yeah, I was just going to add that even, the follow-on sessions are not going to be the same content at all, right? So the following sessions that are coming up pretty much on a quarterly basis, with this being the first, are going to cover different aspects. Each one sort of builds upon the other. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
Second thing to note is that currently the folks that have signed up have been given essentially, for lack of a better term, I'll say the community license to the TeejLab API discovery platform. And if people are very interested as a result of this class, we do have a limited number of named accounts, real accounts that provide full functionality that will be available. I included as one of the survey questions a particular question on if you're interested in obtaining such a real, quote unquote, real license going forward. So if you make note of that there or contact us at ISACA San Diego at gmail.com, that would be good as well. And so I'll leave it at that, yeah? And I'll go ahead on mute.
No, that's awesome. And I will drop the email link in the chat for anybody that's interested. Do ping us and we'll be happy to work with you. Other than that, Baljeet, I'd love to hand the microphone over to you. And I think I'm as excited to learn as much as everybody else we've got here.
Great. Thank you so much, Dave and Tim and the rest of the ISACA San Diego chapter leadership team for inviting me back. I know, Dave, you have been generous enough to spend a lot of time creating this program with us, and equally thankful to Tim working on the logistics to make this event happen. So thank you to both of you and the rest of the chapter leaders to help us come back and share the topic today. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this Monday evening. I'm Baljeet. I'm the founder and CEO of TeejLab. This is perhaps my third session with this chapter. Really honored to be back with this community. The previous two topics were also on similar ideas around APIs and AI and legal and security compliance, but this is going to be more focused just on APIs, perhaps starting with some trends that are shaping up today's digital economy, specifically driven by APIs, and getting into more on the security side of things. At TeejLab, we are essentially looking at API risk management, which is the topic today, but I'll share more details about that work perhaps towards the end. But let's start with the agenda, which is focused more on APIs, how they are evolving pretty much at a global scale, and what impact it is making within enterprises, how these digital technologies are shaping up enterprise products and services, and in particular, what kind of risks these technologies are bringing in the enterprise world.
Baljeet, were you wanting to share your screen? Because we are not seeing it.
Oh, really? You're not seeing my screen growth of web APIs?
No, no, we're
Oh,
seeing you.
my, oh my goodness. Okay. My apologies.
No, no worries.
Oh, sorry. So we missed all that fun I was explaining. So now can you see my screen?
Yeah, yeah, you're
Okay.
gold now. And if you just want to touch on those real quick, that'd
Yeah.
probably be cool.
Sorry. And thanks, Dave, for your quick interruption. I'm glad you did it. Yeah, so let me go through this very briefly. I think you can still recall my historical perspective I was covering. So in early 70s, we saw APIs as a way to connect local resources. Then web took off in a big way. We saw these local resources, they needed to be exposed through the internet, over web, through a service. We saw the growth of web APIs. And in early 2010s or even earlier, we saw APIs as digital assets that companies were building to integrate with various components and applications. But moving forward, they are no longer just the digital assets, but a way to drive your digital economy because they're empowering many of these applications and also for monetization purposes as well. And I've gone through this trend that I shared, how remote procedure calls in early 70s essentially gave birth to the APIs and the interfaces that were needed to share resources within a computing environment, in a distributed computing environment. And with that came the need for standardizing various specifications or ways to communicate between these different resources. And we saw the emergence of CORBA, or component based object models, and also SOAP and XML, essentially to facilitate that communication between different computing systems. And then we saw the evolution of web based APIs. So, APIs that were empowering or connecting local resources, organizations found them to be useful to expose as a service over the internet, web based APIs. And we saw the evolution of REST based framework. Essentially, it was more simpler, scalable, and aligned with more so of HTTP protocol, because then you can embed these applications through the browser and access those functionalities by exposing REST-based APIs. And we saw companies like Salesforce, eBay, Amazon truly championing this model. And they essentially empowered organizations to move into the cloud, especially Amazon. Not only they did this internally to manage themselves, but then they build something very useful in the form of AWS, empowering organizations to move their software and the data into the cloud, and did the same thing what Amazon did for themselves. And then we also saw, especially in the startup ecosystem, where organizations were able to mash up these different APIs that were becoming available in this ecosystem. And with that, we saw the growth of publicly available APIs. Some of them were open, free APIs, very much similar to what we saw with the software industry, where from closed door they become open source. And you may recall this slide from one of my earlier presentations, and this is happening pretty much across board. And essentially, to empower these data driven technologies, either it was web indexing or multimedia information through, for example, YouTube or other social media or more so recently with the usage of chat GPT base, essentially empowering applications that are being empowered by mining of vast amounts of data curated from various technologies. And I'll talk more about this on my next slides. Another trend that you might find very fascinating is the growth of cloud. And you can see that how these pieces are coming together because data and software was or is moving into the cloud. Huge investment went into the cloud. Immediately after AWS, we saw the growth of Azure ecosystem. GCP followed by Google, and other clouds, by Oracle or even Alibaba. And a lot of investment went into cloud, essentially because companies were living in the cloud, or companies are living into the cloud. Of course, these clouds have evolved to become more hybrid, in some cases private, some cases public, or a combination of both. But this is very consistent with what we saw, and you might wonder what this has to do with APIs and risk management and compliance and security originating from those APIs. You can see that as software and data moved into the cloud, companies needed to connect their systems with other systems. The first need was, okay, I need integration with Salesforce, or I need to expose my data for my customers and partners because they're asking for integrations. So this was a way for organizations to provide the first generation of those APIs, the web-based APIs. But then the story does not end there. Now companies had data living into the cloud, and they wanted to monetize those data. Either it's a weather app, or it's a satellite based company that is collecting those data, or a mapping based system like Google Maps or Bing Maps. uh, when you want to integrate a service, or any of those applications, all you do is basically integrate one of those APIs provided by these uh, cloud service providers. So in 2010s and beyond, we saw how cloud and mobile took off in a very big way, and that's where API first economy took place. Now, in my previous example, I talked about Salesforce, eBay, and Amazon. They were truly the companies that were essentially built upon APIs. And that was a way they were able to simplify their business processes. They were able to build an ecosystem where other companies could build and integrate on their ecosystem. Then they did the same thing for other companies. They themselves were not necessarily cloud companies, but they needed to do the same thing what these companies did. Either it's a Twitter, Facebook, Google, but eventually Google also became a cloud company providing GCP. But you can see their own ecosystem now with the APIs they're building, either from AI perspective, speech processing APIs or mapping. Of course, they had those mapping services very early on. But on top of that, they started building many more APIs that could empower various kinds of digital applications. Then we also saw the need for graphical based or event based APIs. So, graphical proposed by Facebook essentially built upon the fact that many of those REST APIs were kind of rigid. Uh, in some cases, your business functionalities cannot be predicted in advance. So once you build an API, if it doesn't evolve with your business needs, then you're kind of stuck. So GraphiQL was a way for companies to essentially pose more flexible queries that can be answered from the backend. As your business evolves, you can pose those questions in a more structured way, perhaps in a more flexible way, to fetch the data that you needed from those systems like Facebook, like platform based systems. But also the event based APIs or event driven APIs also evolve, primarily because it's not always needed when you need to make a call. Uh, if you understand API ecosystem, then whenever we need to fetch a data, we essentially make a call to another system. We fetch data, we embed that data in our business processes, and that's how you run your systems. But oftentimes, that requires you to predict in advance when you need to fetch the data, or at least you need to know at your end when you are ready to fetch the data. But in some cases, you only want to fetch the data when an event occurs. For example, if you're integrating with a, let's say, a payment gateway, or to uh, an exchange where a particular price goes down, and you want to push that data back into your system where you can make certain decision making. So this way you can have a lot more flexibility in terms of when you need the data, depending on when certain events take place. While this was happening, during the same time frame, new companies or new solutions were born that were providing API management solutions. Now, this was no longer about companies like Salesforce empowering organizations to build their APIs, and or AWS providing a way for you to host your services into the cloud. But now you needed to manage your APIs, because it's no longer just about one APIs, 10 APIs, or 20 APIs, or 100 APIs. These APIs could run into hundreds of thousands. I've seen cases with firsthand in one product having integrations of 5,000 plus different APIs. So then you needed to manage those APIs, govern those APIs. Then we saw the rise of solutions like Apigee from Google, or other cloud-based systems that could manage your APIs, and so on and so forth. With that came regulatory compliance. You needed to have a way in or mechanisms in place to make sure these APIs are not exposing data that you do not want to expose. Either this is something you are building, or this is something you're consuming from third parties. Nonetheless, you have certain obligations, because at the end of the day, APIs are transacting data. So in 2010 and beyond, we saw the need for API management solutions, and with that came, the risk management on top of those APIs. I'm going to take a quick pause here to check if there is any question, Dave, in the chat window, or if anybody wants to unmute themselves and ask question at the same time, to make sure that my screen is visible.
Yeah, the screen still is visible, and we haven't had any other questions posted in the chat. I did put a note there, so if anybody does have questions, please do post them in the chat, and we want to try and answer them in real time as best as possible. But we've been on top of that so far. And Baljeet, I can share with you and everybody that I did go through and send out an invite reminder to everybody as well. So if there's anybody online that hasn't completed the setup process, I know we've got time and we'll work through it. But those invites did just get sent out again.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah.
All right. So if you see any questions, feel free to pause me again, and I'll be happy to take a pause and answer the question. But in the meantime,
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks, brother.
Thank you, Dave. So with this, as you can imagine, uh, when software and data started to live in the cloud in a hybrid way, of course, we couldn't get rid of on-prem altogether. We still have on-prem, we still have cloud. In a hybrid environment, we live with both. But one thing which you will all agree, we needed to be connected internally, externally, with various kinds of systems, enterprise systems, and social media, and more so recently with intelligent systems like ChatGPT that you're seeing here. And this need of connectedness is increasing day by day. You are building APIs to be connected because your customers and partners are demanding those integration points. In some cases, they essentially want your data and intelligence that you build. They don't want your heavy GUI or dashboards. And then you are forced, if you are not already, to provide certain APIs that your customers and partner can integrate in their workflow while bypassing your heavy GUI dashboards and systems. At the same time, you are demanding the same thing from your customers and from your partners, and so this ecosystem that we live in, which is quite complex now, is all connected through APIs. So, moving along on this journey of APIs, I want to share more thoughts about, okay, where we are heading. What do we see next, 2020s and beyond? This is 2024. Many of these things are already on our plates, but there are certain things that I want to grab your attention to. Of course, now companies are not just building their systems; they are building a way, uh, in a API first approach. Why? As I mentioned, they need to be connected. Their customers are demanding these integrations of their technology with their workflows and businesses. And it is no longer just about, here is my system, I'm going to build two APIs on top of that to help integrate. They're asking for all kinds of APIs. So now, when you're building a solution, you already have a strategy in place. What kind of APIs my customers are going to ask? So you have a API first business models, because many times all they want is your data. All they want is your intelligence. When if you think about ChatGPT is not shipping their software. They're not shipping their data models. All they want is, their system is hosted in cloud, in Azure or in GCP or in AWS, wherever they want to. Um, but when you use those AI-driven, generative AI-driven capabilities, then essentially you call those APIs, for example, in the case of customer satisfaction or mortgage applications, you need some AI intelligence to screen those pieces of information. So all you do is just integrate those APIs that makes decision. So companies are building those APIs as a first approach, as well as you are doing the same thing with your own ecosystem.
Yeah.
Dave,
Both.
is there a question?
So yeah, we do have a question from Farah. How do you start inventorying APIs? Where do you begin? In my experience, I have not seen an inventory of APIs, to tell you the truth.
That is a very honest observation. I must say that. Lot of times when I talk to my prospects, my clients, partners, and colleagues, just discussions, one question I always ask is, do you know all your APIs across your products and services? And an honest answer is, we actually don't know. Sometimes they have some ideas, because they have portals, they have some internal teams who are working on certain APIs, so they have documentations. But an honest opinion is, we actually don't know. If I can build upon Sarah's observation. Now, Sarah's question was not that this is a problem. Perhaps the problem is recognized. The question is, how do I solve that problem? So there is a good news. There are various mechanisms from a tooling point of view, as well as a process point of view, we can apply to solve this, or at least address this pain point. And I will share more about this towards the later part of this workshop. Uh, so uh, so what was the name, Dave? Farah or Sarah?
Farah.
Farah. So
Yeah.
Farah, if you don't mind waiting until the second part of the workshop, I will share more details how some of the mechanisms and tools we can apply to solve this problem.
Awesome.
Okay, so that was my first part where I was giving a pitch about how companies are becoming a first API first based business organizations. Even nonprofits, forget about profit organizations, even nonprofits. I've seen nonprofits, for example, there is a company that helps with pet rescue, you know, having receiving these furry pets from various places, and they have an inventory, and they're looking for foster parents to adopt these pets. They have an API to search through their database to match and provide various kinds of inventory based on that. And of course, I've given the example of Google, Salesforce. These are all, I would say, API first companies that provide that ecosystem for their customers and partners. Dave, is there another question?
Yeah, there's a couple of comments in the chat. First one is from Stuart. How does Chat GPT and other API systems obtain access to so many cloud systems and not access privacy protected data?
If I understand question, and Dave, you can pitch in or read it the question again. The question
Sure.
is how Chat GPT essentially is curating all the data they need in the background to build their own system. I have used, of course, different words to explain the question. Did I understand the question correctly, or you want to reread it
Uh,
again?
Yeah, you're very close. Are you able to, if you hit chat, are you able to see? Just to make
Let
sure I'm
me
not losing
see.
anything in
Yes.
translation.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't want to do that lost in translation movie.
Yeah, and you know me well enough that I try to put these mitigating controls in place. But if you
Okay.
can see that, there was that, and then Farah had another comment, and Alex and Farah were kind of riffing on just briefly on what
Is
her.
the question in the Q&A or the question is in the
It's in the chat.
it's in the chat. Okay. Okay, now I see the chat. Okay, so there are two sections. One is Q&A, one is chat, so I was not sure. Yes, I can see the questions now. So question is how does chat GPT obtain the APIs from thousands of sources and keep privacy protection? If the question was, how do they ensure they are protecting the privacy while accessing the data through those APIs? Um, my answer is a lot of times they're scraping this data from various publicly available sources, and I'm sure they have partnerships with a lot of vendors, partners, ecosystems around the world, where they have a perhaps a commercial integration of those APIs, because not every vendor provides APIs in which they're exposing their sensitive information. So and I'm sure there are SLAs in place, making sure that including OpenAI is not violating their terms of services and violating the privacy of those individuals. Uh, that is the best answer I can give. I do not have visibility into open APIs policies, how they are curating this information. If it is publicly available, can they simply take that information? Even if an API was there which was publicly available, are they entitled to use that in the process of building their AI engine? I don't know. I think it depends on vendor to vendor what kind of terms and services they are providing. But being an open AI, I'm sure they're doing everything in their power to be compliant. But that's a good question, Stuart. And this is one of the topics I will flip the other way around. In which case, if you had to use those APIs, how would you use it? As a matter of fact, we are seeing a lot of cases in which organizations have the opportunity to use those APIs, but are they being compliant? Um, and more importantly, are they aware of those risks that they are absorbing while using those publicly available free APIs, and how they are being compliant? So, Stuart, I gave a long explanation to your question, but the short answer is it really depends on who's consuming those APIs, who's providing those APIs essentially, and how the data integration is happening to protect the privacy of individuals and organizations.
Cool. And there was just, you'll see Farah right above that, you'll see Farah's quick follow-up comment and then Alex's note as well, if you want to see those and touch on those. And then,
Yeah, yeah. So Farah is saying, I see this as an opportunity and a good challenge to solve. Absolutely.
yeah.
And that was the intent behind this series of workshop. Because Dave, Tim, and I, when we talked about this, we definitely see a need, and I'm glad that with some of you it's resonating quite well. So we will build upon these thoughts even more. So I think there are no further questions.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
that's
that's right.
perfect. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. So there are no further questions, and even in the Q&A section, I think the question was already answered, so somebody took care of that. You basically that question was answered.
Yes. Yeah. We're good and current again, so that's terrific.
Yeah, good. So I switched back to my slides again. I was switching back and forth between different windows, so you still see my slides, right, Dave?
Yeah, the API driven digital economy.
Correct, correct. Thank you. Thanks for the confirmation.
Yeah.
So I think I've spoken enough for the API first business models, and I think the audience got the point. And you can see that this has more impact on certain industries. For example, open banking, even before APIs became open APIs, banking folks were already talking about the need of integrate and share this information in a larger ecosystem. And especially, I would say, UK based ecosystems were perhaps taking this a bit more forward compared to North American ecosystem. And that saw the growth of a lot of startups who could build upon these kind of services exposed by banking sector or finance sector. And we saw a lot of startups in this space not having a physical store like the bank would have, or a retail banking division, but they could still run the loan, the financing, the mortgage approvals, all through an ecosystem of APIs. Building upon that, we will see moving forward, we have seen the growth of IoT, but now it's all about Internet of Everything. My coffee mug talking to the coffee machine, seeing my coffee is running out, ordering to through my SAP ERP system, or scheduling a appointment um, uh, of my car service with the vendor, or a recall, all this being connected through a very complex ecosystem of APIs and streamlining those. Some of this it is already happening. If you look at airline industry, if you look at hotel industry, you will see a lot of ticketing systems are doing this, pulling up all the different sources regarding reservation, flight arrivals, booking of hotels. This is all happening in one single platform. We will see this happening in non-tech sectors, for example, agriculture. For example, We have seen this already in insurance, banking, IoT, but we'll see this in agriculture and many industries. For example, in medical field, this is still a very compliant-oriented industries where we need to have a stringent things in place. But we'll see this expansion of API ecosystems to non-tech sectors. This is all about hyper automation and providing more intelligence. If you looked at my examples previously from Salesforce to Google, uh, those APIs or those generation of APIs were all about providing data. But now, if you look at in the last 2 years or 3 years or so, these APIs are not just a raw data. These APIs are not just providing you weather information. But look at ChatGPT example. There is a prompt that you can inject through one of these APIs that gives you an answer, which can go into your customer relationship workflow, which can go into your banking application, which can go into your Q&A that you're having with your customers. Those APIs are not just raw data providing APIs. They are actually providing intelligence within your system. And if you look at eBay ecosystem, or if you look at other e-commerce based companies where APIs are transacting hundreds and thousands of data points, in one go. If you look at eBay ecosystem, perhaps they're transacting or making calls to thousands of API per seconds or per minutes across their ecosystem. So it's more about automation. It's more about hyper automation through those APIs. And of course, they are becoming more and more intelligent with the advent of machine learning and other data science driven solutions. Blockchain was more of a hype, I would say, in the last 10 years or so. But now I'm seeing more and more commercially successful companies that are built on top of blockchain. Of course, we have seen, uh, you know, um, the emergence of cryptocurrencies, which were essentially built upon a blockchain ecosystem. But now we are seeing voting platforms. We are seeing agriculture and precision monitoring systems which are built on top of blockchain. And they provide a decentralized way to manage your different business processes. Of course, in the case of cryptocurrencies, that was indeed the case. But we'll see a new wave of APIs integrating these systems with other systems, traditional systems that I'm mentioning on my last point. But at the same time, I mean, we are already 5G is already in place, but we are talking about 7G and perhaps who knows 9G and 10G at some point in time. But the impact these uh, uh, high rate exchanging data exchanging networks are having impact on our personal and professional life is their ability to provide digital transformation across various platforms. you know 30 years ago, 20 years ago, you did not imagine having a mobile device having so many applications through which you do banking, through which you do your navigation. But look at your just turn around, look at your applications in your phone. How many applications you have for various purposes? They would not be possible if you didn't have the network that could support that kind of data transaction with these apps on the fly. And they're shaping up all kinds of applications around us. And with more and more AI embedded applications getting into our system, they're all empowering these applications through APIs, which are making not only decisions on our behalf, but also providing automation in, for example, as a personal assistant, booking my tickets, booking a hotel. Sooner or later, this is whether we like it or not, this is just happening at an increased rate. Last but not the least, we will also see a huge bound moving forward uh, with quantum computing. And the very underlying technology, how quantum computing operates, I'm not an expert, but by just learning from my colleagues who are in this space, we are going to look into various new challenges from a security point of view, because all those encryption techniques uh, that rely upon, creating encryption keys that are large enough that cannot be permuted in a shortest amount of time for somebody to launch an attack, they're all going to be broken, because you have computers that can compute these computations in a much, much faster way. And there will be need for traditional systems to connect with these more modern, perhaps quantum computing driven systems there. And you can see that this is already happening today as well. When mobile came or cloud came, the legacy systems or the mainframe still exist. Believe it or not, banks still run on mainframe. Everybody, what we have right now through mobile apps essentially fetches some data somehow connected to somewhere in mainframe. And this will continue to happen. Even the quantum computer based applications take place, we will need ways to connect the traditional systems, the legacy systems with more modern systems, and this is all going to happen through interfaces provided by those APIs. So in summary, we will see the growth of APIs, hyper-connected ecosystems, essentially transacting data all around us, from enterprise applications to personal applications to our hobby and professional jobs that we do day in day out. And going through all those applications hopefully have given you visibility the future that we're heading into, that I summarized on my next slide. This artificial intelligence is adding another dimension to this ecosystem. And there are huge implications, not because they're providing uh, intelligence, but from a risk management point of view, as an auditor, as a compliance manager, or a cybersecurity expert who is no longer only worrying about a normal data breach, but a data breach to a system that is artificially intelligent. So the business risks are completely different and perhaps 10 times more severe. So, how do we deal with this situation moving forward? What I have talked about, perhaps in one of my, some of the colleagues who might have attended the previous workshop where I touched upon this topic, just to refresh your thoughts, and also for the audience who has joined us for the first time, I want to touch upon what exactly AI is in a basic ways, and how we are leveraging upon some of these technologies moving forward in our enterprise applications, and how to deal with those risks moving forward. But once again, I'm going to take a quick pause to see if anybody has any question. If not, then I'll move along.
We are current. There was a question, but it was more on the topic of the CPEs and attending versus the actual content that you're covering. And Tim was able to field that. So at the moment, we are good.
Good. And also a quick feedback, if anybody has. How's my speed? Am I going too fast or slow? You like the speed? Or anybody has any feedback? I'm happy to adjust.
Just got it doing great.
Okay, good. Thank you for the feedback.
And
And also,
and a good with an exclamation point. So
okay, all right, thank you. Uh, and also, let me know, because this is a 4-hour workshop. We want to make sure that people have bio breaks or coffee breaks, so that they can, they are comfortable along. So I think we are almost an hour. So probably 5 minutes from now, if you're okay, we should take a 5-10 minutes break and then move along again.
Sure, sure. Just let us know when you would, and I can hit pause on the recording, and then we'll pick right back up.
Fantastic. We'll do that.
Yeah,
All right.
and we to Stephen's question. Yeah, we are recording, so the recording of it will be available. Will the slide deck be available as well?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, then we'll have both items available for future reference to everybody. Awesome.
All right. So I'll continue from here. So you can see the words popping up on my screen, which essentially is augmenting my flower there, which are essentially the five senses that we are all blessed with. You know, our ability to taste, smell, see, touch. That's what we are empowered with by nature. Uh, and if you look at AI, then it is simply extending those capabilities. It's not creating anything new. Either it's a speech intelligence, you know, your ability to interact with Siri or other systems that translate one language to another, or takes your command to convert your speech into text. It's We all do that as humans. So it's not something new, but it's just extending those capabilities in a more intelligent way, in a more automated way. So I see this as extending our own capabilities. Similarly, for vision intelligence, you know, cameras see, cameras observe. We train them to identify objects, just like we process information. They're processing information and classifying those objects as, you know, apple or a man or a woman or certain situations in which we create outliers, but again doing or extending the same human capability that we have. Similarly, we have made a lot of progress in controlling our robots, simply because they can touch, they can sense through various sensing technologies that they are embedded with. They can move, they can balance, but again, we all do that. Uh, so this is all generative AI. This is all something that is fed into the systems based on the data that we as a human we have already created in the digital form, and we continue to build upon this in many ways. And I think this will answer some of the questions that the colleagues might be struggling with. So from APIs to AI, what's the relationship we are talking about here? So here is my explanation about that. When you are looking to integrate some intelligence in your business processes, the relationship between AI and APIs is very much like this, the tap and the sink underneath, the structure that is providing the fresh water to you. So very much like ChatGPT, when you integrate, all you care is the decision that you embed in your application, but you have no idea how the data models were trained. You have no idea, and that goes back to Sarah's question, or uh, somebody asked that question, which was about how do they protect the privacy? How do you ensure the privacy? We don't know. But beside that point, you can agree, and we can all agree on this point. You have no idea where is this data coming from as a consumer, and how the data models were trained. All you care is the intelligence. As long as it is working for you, as long as it is customized in your business process, that's what you do. Very similar to tap water. Underneath how the sink is there, all you care is the fresh water. So AI is all the gut that is behind, and APIs is a way to deliver that intelligence that you are embedding in your applications. And this is happening across various industries, not just the retail or energy sector or your different engineering industries or financial sector or public services. This is happening across different industries. So I think this is about time we take a break. And when we come back, I will uh, I will go a little bit deeper inside the API ecosystem from enterprise point of view. So far, what I'm talking about is at the global level, how things are evolving, what kind of trends we are seeing from different companies, how APIs got evolved, where we are in terms of what kind of APIs we have, what kind of standards, and what industries are being impacted. But when we come back, I will go a bit more deeper on the enterprise side of things. So let's take a pause, Dave. And I think we are both in the same time zone. So my time is 5:10 right now, PM. Shall we meet at 5:20? That gives everybody 10 minutes.
Sure.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. And unless Tim has an objection, 10 minutes it shall be. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording for now, and we'll be back in just a few.
Great.
Yeah,
If I can, sorry, go ahead, Dave.
I was just going to say, if anybody during the break, if anybody does have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we can dive into those as soon as we pick back up as well. And I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, if somebody wants to take this opportunity to ask questions, I'm still around. I'm good. I have water. I don't need bio breaks, so I'm good. So people who need to take a break, they can. But if somebody has a question, they can stay back and ask the questions.
Perfect. Okay. And I'll be back in about 5.
Okay.
We are back.
Okay, you are still seeing my screen?
Yep. AI and APIs are industry agnostic.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Thank you.
Perfect.
So the next, what I wanted to do is switch the gear from global trends. I have one more slide to talk about global trends, but then take you to the enterprise world and show how complex API ecosystems, enterprise API ecosystems may look like today. But before I do that, I just have a quick question for the audience. So now we understand that APIs are transforming our digital world in a very, very big way. You know, all the apps, all the applications, mobile, cloud, enterprise that you see, they're all empowered through APIs, backend. Um, uh, Even your phone is perhaps connected to hundreds of different applications through different API connections. So you can see that this is making a huge impact on our digital world. My question for the audience is, what do you think? How many such APIs that are publicly available that are connecting these digital ecosystems? So on one of my previous slides, I talked about how 2000 and beyond, companies started building their open and public APIs that are, when I say open APIs, which means APIs that are publicly available over the internet, where people can find and integrate those APIs in their applications. Of course, a lot of APIs remain behind the firewall as internal APIs, but now we see a lot of growth, just like what happened to the software industry. It's my personal belief that lots and lots of APIs will become open APIs. not the standard open API, but the APIs that are publicly freely available. So my question is, what do you think? How big this ecosystem is? So you can answer that question by putting in the chat window whatever your answer is, and I will just see some answers and try to gauge audience interest from there. Okay, so somebody is saying millions. David is saying trillions. 22 millions, very precise. Hundreds of millions.
Can I guess that we don't know?
That's a very safe answer, I must say. Unknown, but many. I guess probably he read your mind. Roger read your mind, Dave. So actually, all of you are right. We are definitely not in trillions. I will go back to my screen and share the screen again. You're still seeing my screen with industry agnostic with pictures, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So we are definitely not in trillions, but we are getting there. It's just a matter of time when we have this hyper connectivity. Our homes, automated, vehicles, AR, VR. Pretty much wherever there is a data, there will be a need for us to connect that data to a useful application for whatever reasons, monetizations or integrations, for the technical or business functionality reasons. So here, what you're seeing in this graph is, I think I've shared this graph earlier as well, but we were tracking the growth of websites and the growth of APIs. And you must be wondering why we are comparing those two. Those are why we are comparing web APIs with websites. Well, fundamentally, they are the same in the sense they provide information. When companies were becoming online in their virtual world, that was a way for them to provide their information. But that's kind of a static information. But now we are moving into more machine-to-machine communication era, right? So APIs are essentially designed and built for machine-to-machine communications. So they are definitely into millions now, but we will see with more IoT around us, Internet of Everything around us, more intelligence. We'll see this grow into perhaps into billions. And regardless of that, this is a number that has inspired a lot of people, which talks about how the majority of the internet traffic is through web APIs now. So, of course, we still continue to have websites where you go visit, read. We have HTML pages or websites, but a lot of this traffic, 80% or so, is being where the data is being transacted through APIs, and that's where these APIs are contributing to most of the traffic. And from there, you can quantify very much the value these APIs are creating. So, what are the enterprise challenges? This was all about how the API ecosystem at a global scale is evolving. So, what's happening within the enterprises? So, I have another picture to explain this phenomena. Within our enterprises, we have all these different applications. Either it is your software security tool, your workbench, your data analytical tool, they're all connected through APIs. So either you have these integrations from your internal business units, or you're exposing or you're using APIs from public marketplaces. One way you have internal APIs is you have one business unit sitting on a particular form of data that the other business unit needs. It happens all the time. We live in different data silos. And no longer it is acceptable, at least in papers, that we should be shipping or dropping our data through Dropboxes or emails and Gmails. But now we are building these internal APIs to streamline our internal processes, to make sure that these data can be utilized by other teams within our organization. And this is happening with governments as well. A lot of governments, including the US, Canada, India, and many other governments around the world, they have open data policies. When they say open data policies, many times they are essentially providing APIs through which the organizations or startup world uh, can use those APIs to create new innovations. I know in the US and Canada, we can see a lot of those APIs by GSA, General Services, or Veteran Affairs. In Canada, we have Finance Ministry or Road of Transportation Ministry. They are all providing those APIs that developers, startup ecosystems, or even enterprises can consume to provide various digital applications built on their data. Similarly, within organizations, same phenomena is happening. Different departments are breaking these data silos to integrate through different internal APIs. But that doesn't mean that you're not putting up, your policies internally, who should access to what data, uh, who owns these data as a business unit. Do you have a monetization strategy in place? How you treat this data? Are these internal, or are you building this exclusively for your customers and partners, or are you going to sell these APIs? Every time a customer calls those APIs, you're going to charge them 50 cents, or you're going to charge them $1 if it's an intelligent API. I don't know. Depends on your business model. So the point is, you have all these marketplaces, your own, through which you are exposing APIs, or third-party APIs that you are consuming from. You have API gateways to access, control your APIs. You have different communities within your startup world or your developers that are consuming those APIs. You have internal stakeholders, not necessarily engineering team that build the APIs actually owns them. Maybe they are just responsible for engineering the solution, but the business unit is responsible for the business decision making, the policies around monetizations and whatnot. So you have a lot of stakeholders in this ecosystem, and in summary, you have a complex enterprise ecosystem in which you need to have, excuse me, API management processes, API management tools, API governance processes in place to manage your ecosystem that is already looking very complex. Now, a word of caution: not every organization is like this entire picture. Some could be more complex, some could be less complex. But perhaps you and I, we can agree that a lot of organizations fall into this place where they have an ecosystem upon which they need to build their services, they consume APIs to expose those, and they need to protect these APIs from various risks, and also perhaps at the same time continue to do their business to make money. So now let me divert your attention to some of the security problems that we are seeing firsthand. So on the very first slide, on the very first set of examples that I'm putting up here, you can see, all the way from social media applications to medical applications to telecom applications to other enterprise solutions, to other kinds of applications. They all have been compromised in the past through APIs. All their APIs were compromised that lead to all these data breaches I'm talking about. In each of those cases, either customer data was stolen, or their data was compromised in a way that posed them to certain risks, or they had to mitigate those risks and spend money on recovering those assets and other problems. And this is just going from 2016-18 timeframe to all the way to 2021. But we are already in 2024. So just this morning, I was looking into updating my slides, and I basically started looking into, okay, what are some of the recent vulnerabilities that have happened? I was surprised to know that this year Kia got compromised. One of their API was essentially providing integrations with their actual vehicles, and hackers could exploit those APIs to remote access the assets, the vehicles. They could start those vehicles, they could track the where the vehicle was, the navigation. In some cases they could roll up window and down as well. All happen through APIs. And Similarly, in many other applications, for example, with Twitter, some of their APIs got compromised where they could expose the user's name, email addresses, and phone numbers. Similarly, as a matter of fact, ChatGPT got compromised. Now, their compromise was not necessarily that bad because it was compromise of their internal messaging application. So it was one of their internal APIs somehow hacker got access to, and they could see the internal messages. Of course, that exposed their some intellectual property, how their AI system was built. So not a major damage was done uh, to their system, but again, the point I'm trying to make is you have all kinds of problems happening with all kinds of companies simply because not because they want this to happen, simply because their inventory, their APIs, and the system they need to be connected with is it's a scalability issue. And many times you're dealing with standardization issues, you're dealing with broken authentication authorization problems, which lead to these kind of issues. um, One example I will give is this example in which a lot of the connected systems in which you think you are not necessarily affected, but many times moving forward, you have devices in which you are providing your personal information. For example, uh, your activities related to your gym, or your exercises that you're taking, or even the food habits that you have. So in this case, Palanton was exposed, in which people's age, gender, uh, their routines, information was leaked through one of their APIs that got exposed. So, in summary, all these API problems are ultimately boiling down to data breaches. Hackers or bad actors, all they want is your data. In some cases, they have APIs to exploit. In some cases, they have the whole system to exploit. But in this is just an example. Until February of this year, where 750 billion or so records were stolen, just in the first early 2 months. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. And you must be wondering why this is happening and how this is happening. Of course, one reason is APIs are being compromised. But what's the actual underlying issues why these APIs are being compromised? And what can we do about this? So, this is what I will talk about in the next few slides or so. But before I do that, as usual, I'll take a pause and see if anybody has any question. Or, Dave, if you can see the chat to see if anybody has already put a question there.
We don't have any new questions. Wait, just got one. When assessing applications, how do you test the security controls related to APIs, like authentication? and such.
Good point. The very first step is you need to know what APIs are in that application, correct? Unfortunately, in many situations, we don't know those API integrations. We believe we know everything, but in some cases, you have downloaded GitHub libraries integrated in your complex application ecosystem. You have bought companies. So, those are some of the reasons when you do not fully understand your applications, let alone how to put controls on those APIs. So, the first challenge is to find those APIs that are embedded in your applications. Once you find those, then you talk about what is the security posture of those APIs. Who's the vendor? What is the nature of this API? What data it transacts? Does it transact a personal information, or does it transact just weather data for which I do not need to worry about the data protection rule, or AI? We have in Canada is a bill called IDA, AI uh, uh, and data rule. In Europe, we have EU AI law, which talks about applications using AI capabilities. And a lot of times, the integration of those intelligence driven APIs could very much classify as intelligent applications. So the point is, the control depend what kind of controls you need depend on what this application does, what kind of APIs are there. But it all starts with the technical controls first, shifting left, finding applications, finding APIs, finding what those APIs do, then process-based controls. How do we audit them? When do we audit them? How frequently we see them? Then, of course, the management or governance controls, which is how do we do this continuously? What laws will be applicable on this application, because these applications are embedding these kind of intelligent APIs. So the answer, again, I gave a long answer to the question, but hopefully that answered the question. But if you have any follow-up, feel free to put it in the chat window again.
Yeah,
Any
and
other-
there are a couple others there if you saw.
Yeah, let's take them.
Yeah, was this something that web application firewalls are not monitoring or catching?
To the best of my knowledge, the answer is no, they don't. However, now companies have started to look into making their gateways more intelligent, uh, because separating your APIs embedded in your applications from a normal traffic is a not a straightforward solution. And the firewalls in place, they can see that, well, you have a malicious attack coming from a particular API, or sorry, particular IP address. But that doesn't tell you if a legitimate user is abusing your APIs, because they may very much register on your portal to use your APIs, but ultimately end up abusing them in many different ways. And gateways have no idea. The firewall has no idea about this, right? So a lot of times, um, uh, there could be problems like that. But also, there could be other problems which is coming from inwards. For example, your team may build an API thinking that this is an API that needs to be used internally, but suddenly you make that application open source. Sometimes you do that because you want to put it out there on GitHub account, in your enterprise account, where your partner ecosystem grab those applications and connect with the system, and there you end up exposing some of your internal APIs. So there are a number of reasons where the gateways and the firewalls will not be able to detect these complex cases. And they don't have the intelligence to detect those cases. And hence, you will need specialized solutions. What was the other question, Dave?
Farah had asked, and there's two. Farah had asked, does APIs process information, or are they just pass-through systems?
Good question. Both scenarios are possible. There could be an API integration which you could have, which simply calls and passes on the data that it receives as a workflow within your application workflow. It does. But it is possible that you may invoke one API which takes the data, but its mechanisms require you to invoke other sets of APIs, perhaps internally, to do something more complex than just simply passing on the data to the workflow. So both scenarios are possible, but I would say the first scenario is more common than the second one.
Are you seeing the second one growing at all? As
We do. We are.
okay,
We are. And as more and more intelligence gets embedded into these applications, and this is also in aligned with low code, no code applications sitting in the cloud, making or exposing functionalities that others need, without shipping your software. And yes, so one API call may invoke another API call. So there could be chain of things that could happen. And data provenance is becoming a huge problem behind all of this.
yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I can see as this continues to mature that there would be more dynamic functionality like that, which to your point is only going to lead to more of, who owns the data and other questions like that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
okay, Jim had posted about finding the APIs to audit their security. How would you recommend that discussion typically go between auditor and technical control owners and or management concerning scope and security of the company's APIs?
Okay, I think I understood the question, but I just want to read it one more time. So,
Sure.
yeah, so I have opened the chat window now. Um, yeah, good question, Jim. There is no straightforward answer to this problem, and it is always a challenge to coordinate the API governance effort between auditors, the team that has built the APIs, and perhaps the team that actually owns the APIs. And these are not the same teams. So my best guess in this situation is, or not just a guess, but my educated uh, learning through this process, talking to a lot of customers and partners, is um, it starts with a dialogue. It starts with a dialogue where auditor has a simple question about, we need to meet these ISO 2007 compliance goals, or we are launching an application in EU region. We have this checklist of compliance things we need to meet, and this is what I need from you, Mr. Engineering team, Mr. Engineer, or product owner, or whoever that person is, or a lady. Uh, and the idea is to start the dialogue and see what information they are already documenting. Do they have uh, a system in which they are recording all those pieces of information? So it's a twofold problem. One is where you're consuming those APIs. The other one is where you're building those APIs to expose to your customers and partners. And both are important for various purposes. And if you are lucky as an auditor, you will have many of those informations in place. But unfortunately, the state of the art is you do not have that information readily available. So you have to scramble between product teams, engineering teams. As an auditor, it's a difficult task, to be honest. But you don't have a choice. You have to chase. You have to align. You have to motivate, And you have to empathize with engineering and the owning team, because it's just a evolving topic for them. And the tooling support is not fully out there. uh, People have understood open source risks, and they have defined their processes, built their open source offices that have structured these mechanisms and put teams together to manage that, but not so much for the APIs. And we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can learn so many things, or auditors can lead that effort internally, where they have already worked with open source risk compliance, they have worked with third party license compliance. So it is just another feather they have to add in their cap, where they can lead this discussion and align with engineering, product, and the CISO's office to make that effort. Hopefully that answered your question, Jim.
I get a question for you on that. Similar to what you were saying, where I've loosely talked to clients where you want to treat or approach APIs in the same, similarly to how you would treat third-party vendors that would then have access to the network in some capacity.
Are you talking about your APIs being consumed by third parties, or you're talking about you consuming third parties' APIs?
It actually both to some degree, meaning at some point we need to know what we're dealing with,
Mhm.
to identify and have an inventory as best as possible. And then based on that inventory, whether they're internal ones or ones that we're connecting with, what is their level of criticality to the operation?
Mhm.
And to the data that they would have in either scenario. And then from there, being able to prioritize what you have towards protecting it, which would then kind of be a prequel to what Jim was saying about within the organization, whether it's the auditor, technical, somebody's going to own it.
Right, right. Somebody has to own it. Absolutely, it could be shared responsibility, or one has to lead it, and others support them. So yeah, so various strategies need to be applied to do this. Now, let me answer your other intuition you mentioned. Should this be treated as a third party? See, there is no right and wrong answer here. You could
Mhm.
very much categorize your APIs according to business risk, or you can treat them as a third party asset that you need to manage, right? So once you do that, then you already have perhaps a process in place. How do we consume services from a third party? And then list all the assets, including APIs, under those third parties, corresponding third parties, and manage those third parties accordingly. Now, could you, this works well if you have a handful of third parties, but it is possible under one third party, you have a variety of different APIs that require different policies to be enforced. For example, if you have a vendor, let's talk about, you are consuming from Azure a set of APIs that are simply just a weather information. But on the other hand, Azure is also providing you some AI driven APIs, for example, speech translation, or some sort of other AI capable solutions. Do you treat those APIs same way? Answer is no. Why? Because of various policies and what exactly these APIs are doing, you have to have a different framework in place. You need to put different controls in place for those two APIs. They are both from the same vendor, but you have to treat them differently. So, what is the right approach? Should you bucket them under same vendor, or should you create different categories of APIs regardless of where they come from from which third party. And of course, you have a tree kind of approach and do your risk mitigation accordingly. So the answer to your question, Dave, is there is no right and wrong way. You just have to figure it out. How complex your API ecosystem is, how many vendors you have, what kind of policies you're putting in place. What's your API inventory look like? Is it in hundreds? Is it in thousands? Uh, and automation will be key to managing that, because at the end of the day, you can't do this manually.
Yeah, yeah, and what I was thinking or trying to say is similar to what you're saying is, so let's say there are multiple APIs from Azure, like you're describing, but I wouldn't say to, oh, they're all Microsoft, but to be able to look at them and classifying by criticality from a business perspective of what if it went away? What if it got compromised? What
Right.
if it compromised us?
True,
Um,
true. That way, yes, absolutely. Your thought is uh, very intuitive. So that is actually nicely linking to my next set of slides. How do we classify these APIs based on various business risks we perceive?
cool. And then there was something from Stuart there, if you have that open, or I can read it to you.
Yeah, I am. It's open, so I'm going to read it.
But
Okay.
no, thanks for talking through that with me.
Okay, so Stewart perhaps has made a comment. Much of the risk occurs beginning with internal inappropriate exposure of data to internal employees through APIs. Data should not be exposed on the field level based on the need to know employees. Once the data is exposed inappropriately to internal employees and the same APIs you use to external data, or a breach of internal APIs that is inappropriately exposing private data to the external partners, or to a breach. Yeah, so I think that makes sense. So this is one of the scenarios to what you have described in which things could go wrong when uh, when data is not shared on need to know basis. So you could this actually this actually points out another important point, that it's not just the you need to have policies for external APIs. You need to have policies for internal APIs as well. Uh, you cannot simply assume that, oh, this is just internal API, so I can let anybody have access to those APIs. So you need to have those policies in place for internal APIs as well. So moving along with the next stage, so I have a couple of slides and then I jump to the risk management part, or sorry, the risk classification part that I was talking with Dave. So one of the reasons this is happening in this ecosystem is all these examples I gave from a data breach point of view is because many of these problems do actually come from open source ecosystem. You might recall Apache's trust problem, where some of the systems got compromised. Not necessarily every problem in open source is linked to the exploitation of API. There could be all kinds of problems, but open source contribute to a number of these cases simply because you may have open API or open source embedded in your application, where these libraries or applications may have various kinds of integrations embedded in them. Even a single sign-on integration might be there just to enable you to connect to those systems. And many applications that are available for the sake of protecting the privacy are actually themselves compromised in some cases. And the difficulty is your enterprise ecosystem may already be complex. Just like Stuart, the example you gave, the problem of what's internal, what's external could itself lead to various escalations in terms of authorization policies, who should access what. Uh, but at the same time, because the system or the ecosystem you have is already very complex, who needs to access what. So policies get policies are violated, or the privileges are escalated in many situations, even though you have policies in place. Because at the end of the day, your authorization layer is kind of logic implemented in the code base, although you may have certain frameworks in place. But as different authentication mechanisms are built and authorizations are provided to authenticated users, your business logic get um, compromised for various authenticated users, which leads to these kinds of problems. Similarly, you have this inventory, and you have to worry about all these different issues that could take place. Either you had a broken authentication authorization problem, or APIs by design are prone to attacks. For example, at the end of the day, if your application is there to which you are exposing certain APIs for your customers and partners, or even your public APIs that you have exposed on your API portals, at the end of the day, they are executing a query in your database or against your database, and they're accepting certain inputs through the parameters, which can be exploited. For example, APIs by design are prone to injection attacks. So if you are not taking precautions in terms of your engineering effort, then all these problems could occur within your API ecosystem. So, in summary, you have invisibility problems simply because you had no idea all those APIs were part of your ecosystem, simply because you didn't keep track of your inventory. Even if you had that visibility, it's also about usability issue. Who's using what APIs? Internally, externally, you as a consumer or you as a producer? And on top of that, it's also scalability issue. That's another third very important key pain point. And it's all about using appropriate tools, because if you have one APIs, 10 APIs, you can manage some of these things manually. But if you have hundreds and perhaps thousands of APIs, things are not scalable. And developers cannot run these test cases in manually, although in some cases they do. But you need to apply automation intelligence for making sure that your APIs are secure and they're meeting all the standards that you need them to meet. For example, OWASP Top 10 or CIS Top 20, which essentially are best practices that your API should meet with. Okay, so Dave asked an important question. How do we classify these business risks that might be associated with these security problems? The point I'm trying to make over the next slide is there might be two APIs. They may both have the same authentication or authorization problem. Maybe their authentication is broken, which means anybody could access those APIs. But do they have the same impact from a business point of view? Unfortunately, the answer is no, because it really depends on what this API does, what kind of data it transacts, who needs to access those API. And to Dave's point, what is the critical support this API provides in your application stack? Is it a API that is empowering your marketplace where you have hundreds and thousands of online transactions that are happening? If that goes down, you can see the impact on your bottom line, even for one day. On the other hand, you may have an API that is basically connecting your resources for remote controlling purposes. And if that goes down, if it's a device or IoT, you can see the threat to life and endangering somebody's life. So it has huge implication from a legal point of view. Uh, or you may have a simple social media integration API has no impact on the financials, but on your reputation, because if it goes down, then one of the feature goes down and you have impact. So the story I'm spinning here is it really depends on what this API does. What is the underlying data source it integrates with, who's the vendor, and based on these criteria, you identify various risks, or if you can associate a level or quantify your risk to these APIs so that you can prioritize your tasks and measure the business impact accordingly. So here is one way to classify those risks. And a word of caution is that this is not the only way. You could have other ways to classify or attach your business risk to APIs based on the kinds of problems you're seeing with security problems you see with those APIs. But again, this is a good start, what I'm going to share with you next. So the very first one is the security uh, problem. The risk is very much rooted in the usage of the data or the asset you have. Well, this is very much understood. You have a direct security impact if your API is compromised. If this is transacting data, then of course your asset is compromised, and that has impacts on others. So security point of view is straightforward. But that security problem you had with that API, what impact it has on legal, what impact it has in financial, that is where we need some thought process in place. So if this was an API that was compromised, which was exposing customer data, then you can see that customers are not going to be happy about it. Well, it depends on if this was an API that was leaking your customer data, then your customers are not happy. But also, if you are consuming somebody else's data and you end up exposing this data, in certain situations, you are equally responsible for protecting their data. So either way, because your API was compromised, because your API was uh, dealing with sensitive information, you have legal implication. And you do not want to deal with any lawsuits where ultimately the damages are quantified based on the value of the data. So just an example, in many cases I've seen they put a dollar value to the data point that was compromised times how many data points were compromised. The times factor could come from the customers, the time factor could come from your end users, and that's how the quantification may take place. And depending on your ecosystem, this could quickly multiply into hundreds and thousands and millions of dollars. Similarly, the financial risk you want to attach to your API depends on, again, what this API does. If this API was an API integration with MasterCard or Visa, or basically that enables some transaction of dollar values. And if this was an e-commerce website which has this important integration, it goes down, then you can see a huge impact on your financial bottom line. And hence you want to prioritize this accordingly. Similarly, operational, you may not have a immediate security impact, you may not necessarily have a immediate legal impact, but it could be an operational nightmare. For example, let's say in a M&A transaction, you bought a company, that transaction went well, you conducted your due diligence, you had the auditors, you had the financial analysts, you also had the technical due diligence people. They all work together to bring that company into your ecosystem. And let's say in few months down the road, this application is choking and basically bringing your entire network down. Ultimately, you learn that the APIs were not scalable. Why? Because they had some rate limits, because they were free API integrations. You had no idea who these vendors were. Now suddenly this application you bought needed to scale to a larger ecosystem, or whatever the situation might be. So there is no direct legal impact, there is no security threat, but it just ruins your reputation and ultimately leads to financial losses, because all the due diligence money you have spent Perhaps you are hiring a third party to do the audit. So all that money goes wasted. Last but not the least, regulatory compliance are the ones where you're launching a product, you have to meet certain goals within a certain deadline, and you miss that deadline simply because your application was not compliant to certain laws of the land where you needed to operate or needed to launch these services. So, unlike operational and regulatory risks that appear on your horizon or longer period, the security, legal, and financial impacts are immediate. You measure them accordingly and build policies to mitigate those risks accordingly based on your prioritization. Okay, I'll pause again and see if anybody has any question. This is an important slide I didn't want to miss.
Yeah, and there really aren't questions, but there are a handful of comments that people have made in the chat.
Mhm.
Really talking about the element of governance that falls into what you're sharing.
Yeah. Alex, governance, what I'm discussing above without using the governance tag. Classify as a vendor risk we may not know unless it's part of the vetting process and acquisition. Uh, Dianera, that is correct. If you know the vendor, you can demand the vendor for their software bill of material, which is a topic that I will cover a little later today. And from there, you can vet uh, the services being provided by that vendor, including the API integrations they are provided. So yes, you need to know the vendor, and somehow you need to have a process in place to vet the services provided by them, including APIs. Okay, so the next what I'm going to do is talk about different models that are there that can inspire us to build a risk management program. And we saw that there could be security risks. You may have these risks coming from known APIs, unknown APIs, internal APIs, external APIs, but ultimately APIs that are not secure. Their authentication is broken, their authorization is broken. However, how do we know whether these things are broken? Well, that's where the tooling will be helpful, because you need to benchmark them, test them against certain best practices to see whether you can break those APIs. And even before that, you need to know those APIs exist. Similarly, if you had the financial risk coming from those APIs, unknown, free, public, internal, external, you need to deal with them differently. Legal, regulatory compliance risks. If you don't know what you're consuming, then how do you even assess those risks? So that's an important problem to solve. And operational risks, as I mentioned, you have to do a number of things. Treat them differently if they're open source. Treat them differently if they are internal or external third-party APIs, because you may be dealing with different situations in different ways. So the model really that helps us achieve to build something which is meaningful, that can address all these complex issues, is one model that perhaps you're all familiar with, is zero trust. And why I'm comparing zero trust model with a Swiss knife is, you cannot have one single knife that can solve or use be used as a utility in all different situations. So depending on what your situation is, you have to have a different tool, different process, different control in place to address those concerns. Let me quickly review the quick or the important 7 tenets of zero trust. And after this, we'll take a quick break since we are another half an hour, sorry, 1 hour done after our last break. So I'll try to take a break around 6:20, and then we'll take another 5 to 10 minutes break, and then we'll resume again. So zero trust has some good principles that actually helps us, that actually can help us with API risk management as well. And those tenets are: you treat your data sources and software services as a resource. So pretty much every inventory, every source you have in your ecosystem, you treat as a resource. Now, the second tenet of zero trust model tells us that all the resources that you have must be connected, or you're accessing them through secured channels. Okay, so you have already protocols that provide encryption functionality, so you want to make sure that they are all, the communications channels are protected. The third key principle of this model is that all principles all accesses to those resources must be sessional. So what I'm saying is, there is no situation that you have to deal with where somebody has access to something forever. So there should nothing be like that where somebody has access to something forever. So when I say not forever, then it must be have a time span. Time span is nothing but having a session. Now, zero trust model does not necessarily tell you that how long those sessions are. Those sessions could be, for minutes, for hours, for seconds, or even for years. But do they get expired? Um, we have seen this kind of approach in our emailing services or access to various systems, where once we authenticate, then we continue to have access to that system for a extended period. But very similar to that, this zero model tells us to have a sessional approach for accessing our resources. The fourth tenet was the policies that enable the communication, secured communications to those resources must also be dynamic. Okay, for example, if you're accessing a resources from a particular city and suddenly you travel, you move to Europe or in the US, then suddenly the system detects and tells you that, hey, I'm accessing this system from a not a normal location. So you can see that as an example of a dynamic policy where the system adjusts automatically. And similarly, integrity and security posture of resources must be monitored at all times. You cannot simply say that you have built this, or this is external, this is a something, this is a policy that I'm having just on my external APIs, not necessarily internal. That may not necessarily be a good policy. So you must monitor them, the security posture of those APIs on a constant basis. Second last is you need to have authentication and authorization enforced on those APIs at all times. Either they are internal, or they are external, or they are third party, or they are, uh, you know, something that you have used from a partner. They all must be authenticated and authorized. All of this is still not good enough, where you have the policies in place, where you're monitoring through secure channels, where you're accessing your resources through a session approach. All of this is still not enough when it comes to monitoring additional pieces of information from your resources. And the reason is the way the security threat evolves around the applications that we deal with may not be sufficient for us to completely rely upon just the dynamic policy and the who's accessing what. You need to be it needs to be based on the behavior based in many cases to decide uh, when and how you need to monitor this on a continuous basis. So that's basically the 7 core tenets of a zero trust model. So how do we apply this in a situation of API governance, API risk management? And here is the uh, what the what the different resources are if you're interested in learning more about zero trust. So this covers the basic ingredients that you need to better understand this ecosystem. But if you want to read more, once I share the slides, you can have this link available to you. But if you just Google it, you might find some good readable documents from NIST's website or CSA, which is kind of a nonprofit organization, very much like ISACA, but their focus is more on cloud security. So either you can take test report from NIST or from CSA and read about how to manage the resources. Now, next slide, what I'm trying to show is, and not to run out of time for the break, when we come back, we will look into how we can map uh, these tenants, zero trust tenants for API risk management tenants. So basically taking the zero trust model and applying in the context of API ecosystem. So with this note, we'll take a quick break, and it's going to be a little bit shorter break. So we'll come back at 6:30. So actually, it's 10 minutes, not too bad. So we'll come back at 10 minutes, and we'll resume our next set of slides.
Cool. Sounds great.
Okay, so we'll start at 6:30 again, Dave.
Okay, sounds great.
Some APIs may have access through tokens. Those tokens expire in a certain time frame, or even if they are being accessed through API keys, you may force those keys to be expired. So these are all various strategies to implement a session-based approach. Similarly, for dynamic policies, you may have various strategies where not only you have policies who accesses which data, under what conditions, but also if those situations change, how the policies evolve. You must monitor your APIs on all-time basis. Who's calling those APIs and where they are being called from? Are they authorized to do so? So all these things you need to monitor to make sure that um, your APIs are being monitored. Authorization and authentication is a very important principle in zero trust tenant. So your APIs should have both mechanisms in place. They must be enforced at all time. Last but not the least, you need to have APIs monitored, enforced with authentication authorization policies, have dynamic policies in place. Still, all of this may not be enough, and therefore need to collect additional pieces of information. That's your 7th core principle. Now, you must be wondering, what is that additional piece of information that you couldn't capture with the rest of the other principles that I mentioned? Well, there could be situations in which you have enforced or informed your customers that you are going to record the payloads, or you're going to have API responses being recorded. It really depends on what business policies or SLAs you have in place. Other key methodology, which is built on top of enforcing zero trust principle, is software composition analysis. It's more of a practice that a lot of organizations have put in place, which is a kind of a static analysis policy. But the goal is essentially to enable organizations with uh, the discovery of open source components and making sure that they can, uh, you know, they can make sure that all the ingredients that they have in their application are visible enough for them to manage licensing issues, openly known publicly known vulnerabilities, and bring more visibility into their software supply chain. That's essentially what the goal of software composition analysis is. And there is a reason behind it, why this software composition analysis uh, eh, gets enforced to begin with, and what's the perspective from a legal point of view, and how we can leverage upon the tooling to support with the software composition analysis. So if you go back in to uh, early 2021, there was an executive order which talks about forcing the vendors who are supplying to the feds any cybersecurity solution. They are basically required to produce SBOM, or software bill of material that is mentioned here. So SBOM is essentially your ingredient list, how your application is being built. And this is critical from various perspective, because these applications could be supporting national important infrastructures, banking, or even power plants. So having this visibility, what exactly is running those systems, is very, very critical to the feds, and hence the executive order. But this is something which I believe will get enforced into private sector or industries across different verticals, and customers will demand the SBOM pretty much for every solution they buy. And not to confuse you, software composition analysis is a way for you to produce the software bill of material, which is in many cases the legal requirement, at least dealing with feds. And essentially, what it does is helps you with putting a practice in place that helps you with API risk management. So essentially, software composition analysis is to help you find those component inventories. We were asking about inventory and knowing your inventory to put various controls. So if you don't even know those inventory, then how do you put control? So finding those inventories, very, very important part. Who build those, how old they are, what are the functions of those, if there is any public known vulnerability, the underlying licenses, the quality, how do you trust them? These are all important analytics you need to collect related to that you collect for the purpose of SBOM. So the next few slides, I'm going to talk about applying software composition analysis for API risk management. And the mapping is straightforward. Very much like components that you have the same mechanisms built into your DevOps or your CI/CD pipeline, where you can inject along the various processes in place during the design phase or as code is developed, uh, wherever you can inject the ability for you to collect these analytics through software composition analysis. And as I mentioned, ultimately your goal is to collect the analytics that you need through this process, to find out all your components, not just open source but the APIs as well. So from API point of view, what analytics you need is are listed here. The very first item, as you can imagine, is finding your inventory. As an auditor, somebody asks this question: as an auditor, what are they supposed to do? First, you need to find out what questions I need to answer in order to meet my compliance goals, in order to meet my audit goals. Is my goal aligned along the launch of a product? Do we have a certification requirement, or just a audit by a third party for which we need to prepare in advance? Whatever the objectives are. But once you have clarity, uh, what exactly needs to be done, you will have a process in place to find your inventory. Categorizing those APIs becomes very important, because depending on what the category of those APIs are, you will be formulating various different policies. If you remember my business risk classification exercise, you saw that depending on what API does, you need to have policies accordingly. How all those APIs are, how do you deal with API deprecation? Sometimes you have certain APIs that evolve, and certain APIs you want to deprecate, certain APIs you are building. So this is a evolving ecosystem that you live in, and hence you need to track uh, if there are applications that depend on certain APIs, and if you have a transition in place, you really need to know the roadmap, and you really need to understand what is their age, and how soon you need to deprecate them, and decide the steps accordingly. What those APIs do, this is different than what the category of the API is. It's mainly dealing with the underlying function of the API. Precisely, these functions may tell you what data is being exchanged by those APIs. And depending on what data is being transacted, you want to build different policies based on that functionality. Are any known vulnerabilities you want to deal with? Is this API that you're depending on, what's the reliability? Is it, if this is an API that you need to heavily depend on for your e-commerce, it better be scalable. Uh, you should be able to support all your technical requirements that you have with the quality that this API shows. How you can trust this API? If is this developed by a Joe developer, or this is a well-known third-party API that you can depend upon? What's the underlying license? What are the terms of services of using? If this was not a commercial API, it was publicly available, nobody wanted to charge. But does free necessarily mean you don't have obligations? Similarly, what are the risks that you are assuming that this is a third-party API? Or even if you are exposing your API, what risk you are accepting, given the fact that the public will be able to use those APIs? What's the health of those APIs? Are they uh, do they support your requirement in terms of being stable and scalable with your requirements? So these are various analytics you might ultimately need to build your assessment as an auditor. Now, and again, a word of caution is, it may not be possible for you to collect all these analytics in one go. So you decide what is available and you build on top of this. If your goal was to just find out what are those APIs and what are their categories upon which you'll build all your policies, so be it. If you were consuming certain third-party APIs, and if your goal was, I don't care about their security problem, right now my priority is I want to know what are the underlying licenses for those APIs, what are their terms of services. Am I sitting on a risk where a Joe developer sues us, saying that, look, my API was not for commercial use, you end up using it, here is $1 million bill, or here is the lawsuit? So I don't know. I'm just making up some of these issues which could become real depending on what situation you are in. Now is the fun time. I think many of you might be waiting for, to go into the details of some practical aspects that we have been talking about. So many of you did receive invitations from us, or from Tim, or from Dave, or on their behalf from me, or from my team, where uh, we wanted to run some exercises. Now I want to give a quick pause here. I'll stop sharing my screen and go back to the share slide and check if anybody needs any help with signing in to the TeejLab platform. I just saw this just before the workshop. There are a number of people who signed in. So thank you for doing that. But if there is anybody pending, that's okay. You have not missed much. We will help you sign in and get you access to the platform. So if you registered for the event, but you did not receive an invitation from us, put your email into the chat window and Dave or Tim can send you an invitation right now. And by the way, do not go to TeejLab platform to sign from the community sign up button, because if you do that, you will end up being in a different tenant in our multi-tenant cloud system. So we want you to be in ISACA San Diego account for better user management, and some of you might need more privileges moving forward for your training. Dave, if you want to add anything else, or Tim, if you want to add anything else, let the audience know.
I've been posting some stuff in the chat, and we do have some people here that I'll make sure are invited. Jim Duke said, I'm at a page with 8 tabs across the top. Am I in the right spot? And let me see, Rocco. Hold on. Let me find you, buddy.
Okay, so I'm going to share my other screen now so that I can answer Steve's question. So Dave, can you confirm you can see my screen with the signing
Yeah,
button?
I see the login page.
Okay, all right.
Oh, I timed out. So
Okay, so let me first answer. I think it was Jim who was asking that question. Yeah, so to everybody who, if you're wondering if you're in the right account or not, if you see your ISACA logo on top of your left corner beside TeejLab logo, you are in the right account. If you don't see it, let me know, and then I have to move you in a different account.
can you look up Rocco? It's the first email. I don't see him as completing the registration, and I'm not seeing him under the pending. And
Okay.
I'm just
Must be in his junk boxes because when I try to send an invite, he already exists.
Okay, let me see if I can verify that.
Vince Moss, your email was just sent. Okay. Antonio, yours was sent. Let's see if, there you are. Where it is. Antonio, I just sent you an updated invite, and it may be in the spam folder.
And Yaha, you're in. You should be getting an invite.
Let's look at
Okay, so which email you wanted me to verify? The user who
the
already
very
exists?
first one, Rocco Capella.
Okay, so let me grab that.
And thank you.
Yeah, so Rocco Capella has access now. I can see that.
Okay. Then the next one would be Ibrahim Swara.
I tried sending one and it shows he already exists.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Rocco Capella has signed in. What was the other user?
Ibrahim, it's a 1, 2, 3, 4 below Rocco in the chat.
Okay, okay. So let me take a look.
Chat is in.
Okay, so yeah, Ibrahim has also signed in, so I can see his account is created now.
Okay. And yeah, I just sent
Yeah,
you.
he's already. Yeah, I sent him one. Yeah.
Okay. Let's double check. Jim. Let's see if we've got. So for J double.
Okay, so Yaha has already signed in as well. So you can see the account created and Yaha logged in.
Okay, great. Then the next one,
I'll get him, Omar.
which one are you looking at, Tim?
Omar.
Omar, okay. Omar.
And then if Jim Duke is in, let me see if we got you with access.
Okay.
Yeah, Jim, looks like you're in now.
Omar's invitation has been sent, I can see, but he
Yeah.
hasn't completed the sign-up process. So invitation has been sent, I can see that, but the sign-up is not complete.
That's for Omar.
Omar, yeah.
Omar, take a look in your junk folder. We're seeing some land there.
And DUNKK 549 exists as well, so it might be in your junk. Kevin, I guess that's you.
If there's anybody else, still not
Okay,
in yet.
so Kevin, hold on. Looks like you signed up, but you signed up not to the ISACA account. So let us move you to the ISACA account. Okay, so Kevin Dunn should be part of ISACA San Diego account. So basically, when I say ISACA San Diego account, you should see this logo in the top left corner. If you don't see it, you are in the wrong account. Basically, wandered away by signing without the invitation, or something else happened.
And Stuart, as long as you see the ISACA logo, you're okay. I think that Baljeet has a different kind of a different splash page picture.
Yeah, the picture, the background will be different. Yeah, and you can choose the different background, if I'm not wrong, under
Yeah,
settings.
you can.
Yeah, you can change this to whatever you want.
And let's see, Dennis.
Yeah, I'm trying to see
Dennis,
Dennis.
yeah, it shows you as having signed in on yeah, you're in on the ISACA tenant.
What is his email address?
Uh, he
Oh,
didn't.
you're seeing him in the.
I'm seeing him actually in the organization members as having,
Oh,
created
yeah.
his account.
Okay. Yeah, Dennis, see in there now. The ISACA
Well, that
logo
means
may just to the left of the TeejLab logo.
yeah.
Okay, so Omar has signed as well, but again went to the wrong account. So let me move him to the ISACA account. So Omar, you signed up. Now you are in, but I moved you to ISACA San Diego account. Can you confirm? You can see the logo, top left corner. Yeah. So Omar is saying I'm in.
Yeah.
So Omar is good. And Kevin, can you also confirm you are in the right account now?
Kevin did give a thumbs up.
Oh, he did? Okay, good, good.
Yeah, it's a couple
Yeah.
Yeah,
conversations
just
back.
scrolled up a little bit. Yeah, Jennifer, go ahead and make sure you can log in. And
Okay, so somebody's saying they see the TeejLab logo, but not.
yeah, that's
That's
Dennis
Dennis.
Harold.
That's Dennis. Okay, so let me see what's happening. So Dennis, okay.
Excuse me.
Yeah, no, Dennis, you are in the right account. So I'm not sure why you're not able to see the logo. You should be able to see. Just
Maybe do a
beside
refresh.
TeejLab. It's beside TeejLab towards the left. Okay, so confirmed. Okay, looks like everybody's in now. We have confirmations from everybody.
Okay, yeah. If there is anybody still struggling, just go ahead and type your email address in there. We can double check, but from what we're seeing, it's looking like everybody that reported is.
Dennis, it's a really small ISACA logo. And it's upper left next to TeejLab.
Yeah. All
And
right.
yeah,
So
I'm not following what you put there. I don't see you logged in. What is email address?
See, yeah.
Okay.
what was
Refresh it again.
Yaha's email?
Yeah.
We'll drop it in the chat. It was. I just dropped it in the chat. It was higher
Okay.
up.
That one.
Okay, so Yaha was also in the wrong account. Let me move him to the correct account. Okay, Yaha, so if you are already logged in, just refresh your page by refreshing the browser. You should be able to see the ISACA logo on the top left corner. Yeah, so I can see Yaha has logged in.
Yep.
Did he confirm?
I can see it on this one.
Okay. He's still asking for the link. I'm not sure which link he's asking because I can see he has already signed in.
Yeah, I can see that too, but
If you forgot your password, you can reset it again. Because not with.
Okay, so he is showing now as an organization member.
yeah.
Okay, so I think it's just Yaha who's having problem. I can see him in, but looks like he doesn't know how to log in back. Yeah, do you need the link to the system? Is that what you are asking?
Is it just the API discovery.TeejLab?
Okay, so he needs the link. So let me send it to him.
Baljeet, is that the API
Yeah,
discovery.TeejLab?
I just put it in the chat window.
Okay. Cool.
So just use the same email ID and password you used to sign in. Okay, so he's in. He confirms he's in.
Okay. Beautiful.
Okay, cool. All right, so I think this was relatively easy, not bad. Thank you, everyone, for your support and patience in signing in. And thanks to Tim and Dave, both of you, you managed it quite well.
You taught us well, man.
Okay, perfect. So without any further ado, let's just go in. So hopefully you guys can see my email. I'm sorry, my screen. Uh, and I'm going to switch between my slides and this slide. So I'm going to stop sharing one time and stop sharing. Share. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see my screen. And at the same time, they can also see my deck now. Can you confirm, Dave?
Seeing the deck.
Yeah, that's good enough. So because I need to switch between these two screens.
I'm seeing.
You're seeing
Tim, what do you
the
slide
deck here.
deck? And then I see
The restaurant.
like me.
Now you see the restaurant. All right, that's good.
Okay.
Okay, so that's good. Thank you, everyone, for confirming. So this is the main use case we are going to demonstrate as our next exercise, the practical hands-on exercise. So as an auditor, this will answer the question that one of our colleagues asked earlier, what an auditor should do. Of course, they don't have to do all these steps that I'm going to perform, but they can understand what steps I'm performing, and they can ask and work with their teams to do the same thing, or help the team understand the concepts, and at least start a dialogue internally. So the very first thing we want to address is discovery, which means we want to find out all our APIs if we can. It may not be possible to demonstrate all the use cases because you may have applications where we might find certain APIs. So we will scan those applications. You might have in situations we may not have access to your source code. So you may have legacy applications that we may not be able to scan, but still our goal is to find all those APIs. So we will not necessarily scan everything we can in a typical environment that an enterprise offers. But today we'll keep one focused scenario, which is scanning your application. So the goal is, imagine this tool, you shift left and integrate with your application development CI/CD pipeline, where you scan applications, discover what has been found, do your due diligence, assess your APIs, and govern your APIs moving forward based on what you discover. So in the scenario, what I'm going to show is exactly what I described. We will scan an application, look what we found in that application, in particular looking at if we found a particular API integration. We'll see who the vendor is for that particular API we found in that particular application, and what that API does if we can. It is not possible for us to find all the details in one go. So it is a series of steps, as any auditor does. For example, a house inspector comes to your home to diagnose a problem. They're not able to find the problem right away, right? So similarly, our goal is to try the very basic steps and then see what we discover, and then we dig deeper and deeper to complete our audit. And then once we find those APIs, then we look into how we can discover security issues, how we can discover legal issues, and then how we can put a plan in place for continuous monitoring, continuous API governance program. Because it's not just one time, right? Your applications may change, your database may evolve, your policies may change, new laws of the land may come. So things are very dynamic. So you have to perform these audits on a continuous basis. Okay, so I switched to my screen again. The very first thing I'm going to show you is uh, the the aspect of discovery, to just learn about the APIs and what do they do in terms of categorization. Now, at this stage, I'm not saying that I've already scanned. I'm going to scan every application to show all those APIs. But imagine I was able to perform all these scans I'm talking about, and I'm able to index all those APIs under different categories. And recall my example that I was talking about. We need to catalog these APIs in a structured way so that we can formulate policies accordingly. Okay. So in this case, you can see that I have categories of AI driven application APIs, then I have business and technology APIs, then I have e commerce APIs, and whatnot. So I'm just looking at one of the categories, which is AI and data science driven APIs. Why this category? Is this a perfect category? The answer is no. You can describe your categories, you can define your categories the way you want to, depending on what your business is all about, and how do you perceive what categories are important for your organization. You may have simply 5 categories. Your categories may itself be third party vendor name. Your categories may be business unit. So it doesn't really matter what the name, the nomenclature of those categories are. As long as you have some policy in place, how do you want to catalog your APIs, you're good enough. So the first thing I want to show you is, let's say I was able to catalog some of my APIs under this category. Then pay attention to some of the important information that I've already surfaced. What is the API name? Who's the vendor? What are the legal agreements associated with this API? And in some cases, where this API is hosted currently. So from a data sovereignty point of view, this is very important piece of information for me, right? And because what it tells me, if I use this API, then basically it will be hosted in the US in this particular location that I'll show in a minute. So let me show you this particular API, which is showing it's a Neutrino API. And let's look into the description of what this API does. So I'm looking into this particular bad abusive word filter API. And what it does is it detects bad words or severe words from to find a profanity in your text. So the scenario I'm giving you is, let's say you are a marketing company who has built a app for children, and the parents want to have some sort of control on the abusive language that children may be engaging with. So basically, you have an automated solution that filters out all those key bad words. Well, the good news is you don't have to build this solution from scratch. This API, when and how integrated with your application, will basically automatically provide the solution. We may not necessarily have time to go into the details of how we will integrate this particular API into your native application, but I think you get the point. Some of you who come from the engineering background or software development background, I think you get the point what I'm trying to say. This is API. Once I know, I can integrate this API into my application with a simple piece of code that I'll show in a minute. So let's say I'm satisfied that what this API does is what my business requirement is that I want to integrate into my application. So here I can see where this API will be hosted. This is currently showing me this API, if and when used, will be hosted in Virginia. And I can also see the health of the API, which is saying thumbs up. If I want to see what exactly this API does. This is an example functioning of the API. So this API takes a content as input, a string or a text, and basically filters out the bad words. For example, here in this particular case, it detected this abusive language and replaced this with asterisk. So here, this is the output. So here was the input, which was through the input to the parameters. Here is the response metadata through which we were able to find out that this API is hosted by Google. Here is the actual, uh, a small Python piece of code by which I can integrate this API into my Python code. Of course, if your application is being developed into Java, C++, the code may look different, but this is a small code snippet how you will integrate this particular API into your application. But let's say I want to make this a live call. As an auditor, I want to see, okay, I want to try this in my context, my application that I'm building. So I'm just making a live call to this API, and I'm saying anything bad here. I don't know what should I say, not to offend anybody here, but I think you get my point, what I'm trying to make here. So excuse my language here, but I'm going to use this abusive language and see how this API performs for this particular illustration. So you can see that I just made this call, and you can see my history. Remember, anytime I make calls those APIs, I want to keep a record so that I can see the performance and various use cases that I have, which I will demonstrate later. So now you can see that I made a call just now, and let's see the result of this API. So this was my input, as you can see, and I was expecting to filter out bad abusive language, which it did. So by this time, I am satisfied how this API is working. If I want to approve the usage of this API for my team, or this is already approved, I'm just auditing it to see whether the use case reflects the ground reality or not. I can go ahead with n number of steps that we need to do it. Now, I should highlight that this is not only for the auditors. This could also be for a application developer, a developer who's trying to find an API which is listed within their API marketplace that are pre-approved by their teams, and they can use this off-the-shelf solution as part of their integration solution that they're trying to develop. So here they can go simply and integrate this particular API. Also pay attention to the fact that I already know by this time this will be hosted in the US in Virginia, right? So if I had any concern that any inputs that I'm giving to the API, now instead of the language, let's say I was giving words and text to this input, to this API. Now you can imagine all this data API needs, they have to store somewhere in their API servers, right? Now you're concerned that where exactly this data will be stored. So now you are assured that this data will be is being saved in a region where you have approval for, and basically you can go ahead and consume this particular off-the-shelf solution the way you want to. If you're also concerned about the terms of services, you need to have that information readily available. So you can see what are the terms of services by this vendor, which is already listed here, and perform some other due diligence if you need to by going through this terms of services. I will show you an interesting use case where, very much like security is a collective responsibility, legal compliance is also a collective responsibility. We cannot simply assume that our lawyer friends will be able to guide us through all the steps. Imagine if a developer was able to process this document in a way, they can understand this slightly better by just not going through the entire document. So I'll show that use case later, but I think you get the point. The last piece I want to show you is, once I am through with this, then I can do whatever my mandate was in terms of approving the API for a particular solution usage or a particular integration, or approving this API from our own internal mechanism perspective before it is published for our consumers. The last piece in this case is, all of this what I did is discovery, you know but one important catch here was, here I already knew the API that I was trying to investigate. I already knew the API or the vendor that I wanted to investigate. But that may not be the situation for the APIs that I do not know that exist. So the scenario next I want to demonstrate is, from an audit point of view, I want to scan an application. Now, that can be any application, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to choose one application from GitHub, and I invite the audience to just share the GitHub link of their application in the chat window, or any publicly listed open source application. They can put it in the chat window, and I will scan and show the use case on that particular application. In the meantime, I'll take a quick pause here to see if anybody has any question.
We don't have any questions in the chat. It's mostly been people verifying that it's working, and that some were doing some testing as well. If anybody does have a URL that you can drop in the chat, let us know.
Yeah, let's go to GitHub and see. We don't have to take any application that is proprietary. Just to show the use case, we can take something that is publicly available. So with that spirit in mind, we will choose. I don't know if somebody has any recommendation, but let's see what Google is putting in their GitHub public repo. So I just opened up Google's GitHub repo. These are some of the Google's project they are putting out there for consumers to consume or organizations to use. We could take one of these, or we can wait for audience to just make any recommendation. If you are making a recommendation, all I need from you is this GitHub link. So if you go to that particular project, there is this GitHub link. That's all I need. And then I will scan that project in the API discovery platform to do the.
And we're not getting any, but if you do have the chat up, there are a couple of somebody dropped one in there, and then Fatima asked a question, and Francis ran into an error. If you can see those.
Okay, so let me see. Okay, so I'm looking at, since Tim and I and Dave, we are the admin of the accounts, we can see your learning activity. So sometimes the APIs you are trying, if they did not work, that's okay. You can move on, try some other API. It's like very much like you visit a web page that is down, that doesn't work. So APIs are very much like that. You made a call, it didn't work. That's okay. You can go ahead and try some other API. So some of you have already tried some of these APIs. That's great. Good job. Nick, Robert, Trevor, Joshua, you are exploring some of those APIs. That's great. This one did not work. Let me see why it did not work. Okay, so this did not work because perhaps the API key was expired and it did not get authenticated. So as you see, it's a 400 error and looks like it is not functional. This particular API is not functional. So just go ahead and try another API if you want to. In the meantime, I will see if anybody has put a request in the chat window. Okay, so somebody had put lobe hub chat. Okay, that's a great example. So let's see. Um, so Dave, are you seeing my screen which says lobe hat, the GitHub repo?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this link and scan this in the chat window. Not in the chat window, but in my scanning tool. I will explain this. Where is this coming from later? For the timing, you can just watch me what I'm doing, and then I'll give you time to perform the same actions at your end. So under my actions, there is something called scan project or API project. So under that option, it gives you the option to provide a link, a GitHub link. And what the system does is it analyzes that applications and gives you the result of the discovery process that I will walk you through in a minute. Okay, so I can give a name to this project. I will say lob chat, same name as this application is, and hit the scan button. Okay, so what it is doing right now is it is scanning the application and it is giving me the option to, you can see that on my dashboard under my results API scan projects, it is scanning the application. So like any other static analysis tool, it will take some time to process this application and give us the results in few minutes. So let me click here to see if any results have been already been populated. So not yet. It's going to take some time, but we'll wait. Looks like there are a few other people who are scanning other applications as well. So good job. You are already on to a great start.
I got a question for you while you're doing that.
Yes, Dave.
The most recent comment was from Andrea Kim, and it looked like an API for Chuck Norris jokes. So I put that one in a project scanning options and added HTTPS to the beginning of it, and it's sitting at 0%. And I don't know if I did anything wrong, but I did notice it wasn't showing anything in the
So this
window
is
that you were refreshing.
this is something you were trying to scan, or this is an API that you were trying to run?
I did the project scanning options.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, it needs to be a GitHub link right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because I
I
was
can.
seeing that it wasn't showing like
Yeah.
any
So if I
activity on
go
my
back
end.
here, Did you scan it or somebody else?
I tried to scan it. I
Yeah,
went to, if you scroll up and then under my actions,
yeah.
it was
So you were providing the link over here.
correct.
Yeah, it needs to be a GitHub link because what you're providing is because the system needs to fetch that source code to scan it. So your link was not necessarily a GitHub link.
Okay. All right. So I can try the one that Andrea just sent now.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. By the way, Brett scanned something and the scanning result is available now. So Brett's results are already available. So Brett, this is what we find. So the API the project you scanned, as you can see that here, you scanned this project which was Swift Open Security, and you took it from this particular link, and this is what we are finding. So there are a bunch of XML files where it is discovering not necessarily an API call, but some Wikipedia pages. It is discovering, yeah, most of them are Wikimedia pages. Let me see if I can. Yeah, there is. Yeah, most of them are. It is discovering some URLs that are not necessarily your API calls. So that's one project. Let me see if it. So it finished mine as well. So you can see that I just scanned this. The scan process is complete, 100% done. And now let me review the project. So that's what I'm conducting the audit here. So pay attention to the fact that it has found some TypeScripts and it has discovered some plugins provided by this LobHub system itself, some chat APIs, and it has also discovered some GitHub links, but I think they may not necessarily be source to an API call, but just might be some issue related APIs that they are checking in. Let's see what else I discovered. So, Chat Hub. Okay, so I found something. This is interesting. Spot.js. Okay, so looks like there is some integration here with Stop Spotlight. This is Sentry. Yes, so this did discover it is going to host its own APIs, maybe a post call. In this particular file location, it has found some locally hosted APIs as well. And it has discovered this particular API integration as well, which is a get call. So you can see that this is making a get call here, and all that. Okay, so good enough. I think we may not have time to complete the entire application audit, but you can see that how this is helping me discover the APIs that I did not know existed. For example, if this is an application that we have bought, or this is an application that we have acquired from a third party, so we could conduct the due diligence, audit this, and see if it has any integrations that are not acceptable according to our processes. If we are lucky, these APIs are already somehow indexed in our system, and the host information, server information, those details are also available. So we can basically go through those details as well. However, it may not be possible that we have all those details readily available in the system. So we will basically have to integrate this API in the system, make a call, which could be which will take some time. I'm not going to do this right now, but essentially integrate this API in a way so that I can make a call to this API to collect more details about this API. And you can see that it is not only discovering third-party API integrations, but also any local host that it is going to integrate within this ecosystem, within this application. Okay, I will give a pause here and see if anybody has any question. Otherwise, I will switch to my my slide deck again.
We don't have any questions in the chat. So,
Okay. Good job, Carlos, Andrea, Dave. Yes, Andrea has scanned 2 applications so far, and looks like she was able to find the project, Dave, you were looking for. So oh,
yeah.
sorry, she or he?
Oh, she crushed it. Yeah, when she put that in the chat, then I
Okay.
knew what to do. So.
Okay. Yeah, so she scanned this, and this is the link you needed.
Let me move you to the bigger screen.
Yeah, this is what you needed, and so your link was not correct, but I'll put it in the chat. You can see what Andrea has scanned, and you can see that where this API integration is. So of course, Chuck Norris source code is making calls to its own APIs. That's not surprising. But if Chuck Norris was making call to LinkedIn APIs, then you might want to wonder what's going on there, right? What kind of information they're trying to scrape. So here you can see that this application that Andrea Kim scanned at this time has discovered 2 APIs in this particular main.js file, and this is where the integration is.
Got it.
Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to see what this API does. I just don't want to stay here. Let's make a call to this API. So I'm going to make a call to this API, see what this API does. Okay, so I execute. So now it is telling me this facts and joke API by Chuck Norris, what it does. So I look at the response. So all it is doing is it is giving some jokes, if I'm not wrong, or pictures or images. Let's see what kind of pictures it is giving. So I think it's the Chuck Norris its own image, or maybe some other URL. So let's say this was your social media app, and you wanted to make it, you wanted to add some joke or some other criteria in there. That's basically what this API does. Now I want to see where exactly this is hosted. So right now it seems to be showing it is hosted in Ontario in Canada. So it's not always guaranteed, because right now my calls are being initiated from my server in Canada. So it is possible that this is basically detecting the last hop IP address. But this is good enough for me to know where exactly this will be hosted. And more importantly, I can also see the if this is a free API, what exactly they are saying in terms of, are there any constraints of using this API? On top of that, I can actually process this agreement in a way that will list some of the constraints that I can see in this agreement. right? So, not being a lawyer, I do not know what exactly the journal terms are, but I have a functionality by which I can process this using an AI tool that basically summarizes this document in a way which is telling me if I use this API, these are my obligations. I don't detect any no-nos, but what I detect is some obligations of using this particular API. I'm just keeping a tap on the time. I'm switching back to my slide deck again just to wrap up and make sure we leave some questions time at the end. So here is what we did. We scanned APIs, we scanned applications to better understand our application development environment. Now, of course, I scanned this in a very simplistic way, but essentially you want to shift left and scan your applications as they are being developed. So this could be a CI/CD integration with your repositories, where your applications are being scanned and discover those issues and gives you the visibility that you need. You must do this continuously, because just one time assessment will not be good enough, because your applications may evolve, the number of APIs you detect may change, new applications may add new APIs, so you need to constantly do this. And here is a workflow for continuously monitoring your APIs. So you scan, you identify issues, you track those issues on an ongoing basis. Remember, you have different stakeholders. So licensing issues must go to licensing colleagues, security issues, which I did not talk about today, by the way, because we would otherwise run out of time, or ultimately make recommendation to mitigate those risks you are seeing from a licensing point, from security point, or data governance point. Here is the take home exercise for the audience who is interested in what they saw, they liked it. And I'll leave this to the wisdom of Tim and Dave. So you can reach out to Tim and Dave to request them to give you more privileges. The privileges you have when you signed in are good enough for you to scan the application. As you saw, many of you were able to scan the application without any more privileges that needed to be assigned. But in the second and third round, where we do some security testing on those APIs, or verifying the authentication authorization test cases for your APIs, you might need access to the security uh, functionality in the platform. So at that time, you can request Tim and Dave to give you more privileges, and they have the control, and we will basically do this. But for this particular exercise, I would encourage you, do the same thing what you did. Go scan application, see what you discover. And maybe just one point I will highlight here is, when you scanned your application, for example, when you went in and you scanned your application, for example, in this case, I will pick up on Andrea's Chuck Norris example, or this example, and I will say, well, this looks like an API call. So I will say this is Azure API call, this is Cloudflare API call, and I will basically change their status to update and call. As you can see that these are approved. But let's say some of these, for example, this guy, by looking at the JSON file in which it is covered, this does not look like an API call. This might be just a URL. So what I can do is I can reject these ones. So I can say this is not my API call, this is not an API call, and change the status to reject. So pay attention to the fact that these two are rejected, but these two are approved. So when you scan an application, before we meet for our February workshop, go through this and see what you find. Try to train yourself to do the audit on this application to see what do you discover. Once again, this is being recorded, so you might be able to replicate the same steps I'm doing. But look at the API, see if it's a, I mean, systems could make mistake, but you, by looking at the code snippet, you might be able to find and assert whether this is actually an API call or not. So switching back to my slide here again. So the exercise is, scan an application, conduct your analysis, and then Dave, Tim, and I, we will monitor your progress. And if you need more privileges, we will give you more privileges moving forward to further enrich your training exercise as an auditor. So let me summarize the workshop today, what we did. So APIs, AI are a big part of digital economy today. If you are not paying attention to APIs and AI, how they're making impact to our digital economy, this is the right time for this training. So APIs are not just providing technical integrations, but they are the business driver for your company. They are a business driver for the products and services you're building. And not only they are providing data, but they are intelligent APIs. Just like the example I showed, we're detecting through AI, natural language processing, profanity in the language. Perhaps in the next workshop, we'll see some examples from image processing or speech processing as well. So how do you put controls? What kind of controls you need to put in place to govern those APIs? How do you do audit of those applications? Once you discover issues, how do you mitigate those issues with your licensing colleagues, with your security colleagues? Uh, what we have done in the rest of it is we looked at the case studies. Uh, uh, Indeed, the enterprise API ecosystem is not the simplest thing you can imagine, but you have some access to resources, uh, and we want you to try those out and share your experiences before the next class or in your on weekly or monthly ISACA talks. You can bring those thoughts and ideas with Dave and Tim, and of course I meet with them regularly, and we will accept your thoughts and vet them and see how we can include them into our next workshop in February. So, with that note, thank you everyone for paying attention to today's workshop and being part of this learning journey with all of us. Uh, and we have roughly 10-15 minutes to take any questions or just a general debate about any topics that you have in mind or some planning for the next workshop. So, Dave and Tim, back to you for your thoughts.
Well, there are a couple questions in the chat.
Okay,
So
let's
I
take
just
them
want
up.
to, yeah, the first one, um, I can scroll back up from Francis. What training does it take to master this to become marketable?
Uh, okay, what training to be marketable? Let me clarify. Are you talking about marketable internally with your stakeholders or marketable externally, you as a consultant providing services? So I don't know which one you're talking about, but I'll answer both questions. If your concern was this is something new, you need to learn, we do appreciate the learning curve, but then you need to position this internally, get buying from your teams that this is something useful, we need to do it. If you're not doing it, we must do this because this is more secure, more compliant moving forward. And to master this, I think this is a journey. What you did is the beginning of that journey. And another link I would put in the chat window and share it here as well. There is a learning hub within the platform that you can use. If you go under my resources, there is something under learning called Learning Hub. There are a
Oh,
bunch of
yeah.
videos.
No, thank
Yeah,
you for bringing this up. We hadn't
yeah.
mentioned it
There are a
earlier.
bunch of videos that talk about the topic I touched upon. There are various topics. You can search about API security. You can search about audit. So here, for example, not that, but this one, not this link, but this one. So API security. So you can see that there are a bunch of videos talking about API security. So if you click on those, you can watch those videos and see what those videos do. Similarly, I think for audit, I think there are some videos or API forensics. Yeah, so you can see some of these topics which are related to how to find crucial details or analytics about APIs. You can watch this video and do the audit work that we are talking about. Now, I must manage everybody's expectation. Probably there is not all the videos trainings that you can imagine are already available. If there are certain topics for which you couldn't find the video, let us know, let Tim know, let Dave know. We'll be more than happy to recreate the demonstration, whatever you need, to put it out there. But as a good start, as a beginning, there are already good videos that are there where you can learn about the use cases, you can learn about how to use the platform and train yourself. Now, let me answer the other question. How do you position this if you are a consultant, if you are a service provider, to your external stakeholders? Well, the starting point is ask the question: do you know all your APIs? Do you know all your applications? Which internal third party known public APIs they're connecting with? If not, that's a good starting point. That question is a good starting point. Depending on the answer you get, you can start to learn, understand their questions, and try to position yourself what topic you need to learn next. So I don't know if I gave you the right answer or a perfect answer, but I think those are some of the steps you can take to incorporate into your learning journey ahead.
No,
Dave?
that's great. And down a little further, Andrea had dropped a link to share with everybody for APISecUniversity.com is another resource of information. If you're familiar with that, I'm not.
Yes, thank you, Andrea, for sharing that. Yes, this is again useful. If I'm not wrong, they have a lot of concept explained in their training modules. But if I'm not wrong, they're more like slides and tutorials and all that. If you want to do something hands-on, practically running APIs, looking at the responses, looking at code snippets and all, perhaps some of those functionalities may not be in API Security University. But again, you try both. Any resource that is available, this is not the only one you can try. So I
Sure.
encourage to try both.
Cool. No, thank you. And thank you to Andrea as well for sharing that. Fatima asked also, does TeejLab save user search history? And if so, for how long?
The search history in the platform, the users who are looking for APIs, or the
Yeah,
search history of applications.
I don't know.
So let me answer both. So let's
I,
give the
I,
benefit
I
of the
think she meant the former.
yeah.
Yeah.
So let me answer the second part first. So if you scan some application, it stays within the platform until one of the admins remove them. Let's say, I mean, we do not encourage you to scan a malicious application, but it would detect and basically not scan it. Now, the search history that is there, we are not recording those search history, what you're searching in terms of APIs and all that. Um, the tutorial videos I talked about that were here that are not being recorded here in the system. So that remains remains anonymous. But any application you scan, that remains as a record here, because we need to. This is being built for the purpose of training as well as for enterprise use cases that we have separately, which is over and beyond the scope of this workshop.
Cool. The next one is from Sean, and we touched on it a little bit earlier, but would API review be grouped in as part of third-party risk management?
Uh, Answer is in most of the situation, yes. whenever you evaluate a third party, you APIs are like assets from that third party. So you will definitely evaluate those as well. Now, if you're evaluating a independent API without knowing what that third party is, perhaps you evaluate on API basis, but you start to catalog them as third party as well. So it doesn't matter where you start from, they ultimately become, if they are not your internal APIs, they ultimately become a third party API integration anyway. So yes.
Okay, perfect. And then the last question that we have is from Chad. If any security vulnerabilities are discovered, should they be reported?
Yes, you can. You can. So that's a very good thought, Chad. Good job. Um, Now, we are not necessarily a numbering authority with the CVSS ecosystem. So, if you guys understand the NIST ecosystem of reporting the vulnerabilities, then we are not officially part of that. But you could report to us, and we work with other. I forgot the term they use for the approved vendors who are designated vulnerability reporting members of the NIST ecosystem. So we will report to them and work with the vendors. Now you may end up finding an application in which you find an API that you may already be familiar is vulnerable, but you may not be able to perform the security test on those APIs in the platform because for that you need more privileges, which will wait until Tim and Dave approve until you request them to get access to. But yes, if you find any interesting discoveries when you scan an application, if you find a malicious URL, do send it to us, and we'll see what to do with it and how to disclose it in a responsible manner.
Awesome. Awesome. That was the last question. If you take a look in the chat, there's a lot of compliments for you. So you deserve to see those, um, which is very nice. But I think that does take us to the end here. Um, when this wraps, it's going to pop up with a survey. Tim, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but we had put some questions together just to try and get feedback from you. Learn, because again, this is the first of 4 workshops that we'll be working through, with the other ones building off of this. So any feedback that we can get from you is very helpful and very much appreciated.
Yeah, I'm just I'm just gonna say, please do the survey because that'll help us a lot. Because this being the first one, we want to know your feelings. We definitely want to uh, have your feedback, and hopefully you'll be joining us in the successive section. But also, if you enjoyed this, please tell your friends, right? At the end of the day, because they can get caught up, because the presentation and the recording will be available in the website, and we will add users to the community version of the API discovery tool so that they can also practice. And then I saw one question about CPE, and that is, yeah, it's, we've basically timed people's participation on the webinar, and so it'll probably be 4 hours of CPE for those who stayed the whole duration.
Yeah, we'll pull a Zoom will capture who's been here and for how long. And that's what we use just as our evidence, even as if we ever have to report back to ISACA corporate. But we'll pull that report and then from that send out the certificate of attendance. I dropped the email address for the chapter in again. So if anybody does have any questions afterwards regarding CPEs, questions about this, if we want to talk about that license upgrade, things like that, or anything that you have that, to Tim's point, we're really doing this for the community and all of you. So any feedback you've got on how we can make these as best as possible, you have our attention, and we appreciate the input.
Yeah, and if I can add a few words here, thank you, audience. Thank you, Dave and Tim, for making this possible. We equally feel very delighted by seeing so many comments and feedback, and great session, great questions. Love the excitement, great engagement, and we look forward to the next workshop. Once again, thank you for Dave and Tim and the ISACA San Diego chapter leadership team for giving us the opportunity to be part of your community. We look forward to the next workshop, and any feedback that is passed on to you guys from your audience. We will work with you to decide the next topics. Maybe they want to do the next as a more detailed audit application scenario. Maybe they want to focus on security. Maybe they want to focus on data governance and all that. So we look forward to receiving all those feedback and preparing the agenda for the next workshop. Thank you, everyone, again.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. And for everyone not on Pacific time, thanks for sticking around even later for us. So cool. All right. Well, we'll let everybody go. I'll end this, but thank you again, and look forward to seeing everybody soon. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.